My name is Gail Christie. I'm chair of Missions and Social Justice here at First Congregational Church, and we are absolutely delighted to be able to provide space for this important community discussion.
I want to thank First Congregational Christian for putting this on, and also add on to that this is not an endorsement of my campaign. That's very important to note. I'm just somebody who happens to be running for office to unseat Rob Whitman in the 2026 midterms. My name is Tim Cywinski. Yes, yeah. That will not be the biggest applause tonight, I'm sure, but it's certainly a worthwhile one. I also want to thank Aileen Rivera, who's back there taking a recording of me. She's acting as my campaign manager at this point. And Cheryl Johnson, who also helped put all of this together. And I want to thank all of you for being here. The reason for this event is not to promote my campaign. In fact, you won't be hearing much of my platform today. But it's because this is an important issue. And it's something that a lot of folks who are impacted by conditions related to disability, or people who are caretakers, or people who work in the healthcare system or the education system everyone I've talked to who is involved with that has always told me that there's not a lot of opportunities for us to talk about these things. And if we want to make our society better, we can't wait for someone to give us permission to talk about these things, or wait for sort of fight about them. And when I met Sadie and Heather, who are going to be here, I want you all to know that they're the ones who inspired this event. And they walked me through some of the day-to-day challenges of what it's like to have various conditions, and what it's like to have a society that doesn't necessarily think about you when they build something, or when they educate about something, or just the structures of power and literally not having access. I do not accept that. When we talk about these issues, oftentimes we talk about how we make it more accessible for people who are part of the disabled community. But when I met Sadie, she just impressed me about how intelligent and funny and sweet and lively she is. So this isn't about making things more accessible, or making sure that they have more access to us. I think it's important to note that this is more about access to them, to these people who contribute to our society in ways that often go unseen and unheard. But at the end of the day, no one's invisible, no one's voiceless. It's just up to us to make sure that everyone is taken into account when we have policy or community. So I'm going to hand it over to Sadie, and then we're going to go through a panel. This is one of those rare occasions, I guess, where a politician is just going to shut up and listen. But after we're done talking, I don't want this to think like it's just a one-way discussion. This is about having a dialogue. You have a note card. That is not for submitting questions to us today. We want that to happen in the middle of the room with this microphone here. That is for you to come up with your own solutions or your own questions, and we're going to collect those, and we're going to try to do some good with the discussions that we've had today, and try to build at least some recommendations and platforms for local government, state government, and for hopefully the federal level, because it's going to take all of us and every single opportunity we can to make our society and our community and our state a reflection of our obligation to look out for one another. That's what today is about. Because when I meet folks like Sadie and Heather, I realize that there's a lot of things that are unfair about our system. And fairness is just another way to say justice. And if everyone can't experience justice, then justice isn't real. But it's up to us to change that. And that starts with listening, and that starts with having a dialogue. So, really quickly too, before we get started, I also wanted to recognize some elected officials who are here. We have Supervisor Jessica Snyder, who's here to have a go with it. Showing a commitment of listening, and wanting to have that dialogue. I also wanted to recognize Delegate-elect Lindsay Daughtry, who is in the back and just showed up. But like I said, please have your thinking caps on, please have a willingness to share. And like I said, now it's time for me to shut up and listen and take notes. So, I'm so sorry. Yes, so, I was going to introduce one by one. So the first one, like I said, is the person who has inspired this event. And I'll be your MC for tonight. Sadie Massey, who, I know you have a whole thing prepared, so I don't want to get into it, but we've just become closer, and she's kind of been my liaison of understanding these things at a real bottom-up level, and I think that's most important. I think her voice has just been invaluable to figuring out how we have policy on every level to reflect needs, one way to look at it, but I think it's an obligation that we all have. So, Sadie, I'm going to take it away, and then we'll go through the panel. And like I said, feel free to make this a dialogue. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sadie. I'd like to thank Tim and the volunteers for organizing this event. I also appreciate everyone who showed up today to share their stories. Here's a little bit about me. I live in Henrico County. I'm studying graphic design, and I enjoy making art, jewelry, and dancing. I'm also an MDA ambassador and was formerly an equity ambassador when I was in school. I was born with a neuromuscular condition. Basically, this means I have generalized muscle weakness, along with balance and coordination issues. I need mobility aids to help me get around.
Hi, I'm Heather Massey. I would also like to thank everybody who came today, and Sadie and I really have been looking forward to having a conversation, because even though I try and get us plugged in and get Sadie plugged into as many organizations and opportunities as possible, I realized that, wow, we had actually never done a roundtable that focused on disability. So we appreciate this opportunity. I would like, before I jump into anything further, I would like to take a moment for us all to honor the memory of Alice Wong. She was one of the greatest disability, I'm going to start to cry. She was one of the greatest disability advocates of our time. She recently passed away, but her work for sure is going to carry on for generations. So if we could please have a very small moment of silence. Okay. So about me, I'm a suburban mom. I'm a geek. I like science fiction and fantasy. And I formerly worked as a counselor in the mental health field. And then I had Sadie and was thrilled to become a parent, grow my family with my husband. And so one of the things I realized that a lot of the parenting books do not mention, at least the ones that I read, is preparing you for what if your child becomes disabled for whatever reason. It could be they were started off able-bodied and then had an unfortunate accident, or they had like in Sadie's case, a genetic condition. And so this has been a learning curve for me, although I am not a stranger to disability, because my younger sister was hit by a truck at age 12 and she sustained a brain injury. So I grew up with, the impact of that. And I think it helped prepare me in some way to be a parent of a disabled child. So it wasn't as much of a shock, I guess, as it might have been for someone who didn't have anybody in their lives. So it helped prepare me, but I still had so much to learn. Not only about disability, but also about being a caregiver. And it's funny because when you have a child, you're taking care of a baby and and then they're a toddler, and you do everything for them. You help them get dressed, you help them bathe, and all of that. And then they get older, and some of them can go on to do those tasks of daily living themselves. But in the case of having a child who develops a physical disability, you discover that, it doesn't stop with the helping out with the activities of daily living. And Sadie's condition has been progressive. So she started off being able to walk and play and jump and run and all of that. So we had a kind of a gradual learning curve as well, where first she just needed leg braces, then she needed leg braces and a walker, then she needed a walker and a manual wheelchair, and so on, and has graduated to this power chair. So for us in that sense, we had it a little bit easier because we had time to adjust for each stage. But I know other families are not are not in that space, where sometimes they have children with very complex medical needs.
So I think that's another reason to have these conversations, because there's so many different kinds of disabilities. And I mean, I can speak to, and Sadie can speak to, neuromuscular and physical disabilities, but there's so many different kinds out there, and some of them are even completely invisible. You know, you could walk by someone and they have a disability and you wouldn't even know it. So, yeah, I look forward to hearing other stories and deepening my own understanding. And I think there's a lot of great advantage to having the back and forth and sharing of, exchanging information and learning from each other in ways that, you know, you can't just pick up from a book or even a TV show or a documentary, so.
Thank you both. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Cheryl Myers-Johnson, who is one of the folks who also helped organize this event. Cheryl is a mom and a grandmother, a rare disease legislation advocate, and predominantly for autoimmune diseases and, sorry, I can always mess that up. Yeah, thank you. Retired educator, healthcare advocacy group leadership of, she's also the healthcare advocacy group leadership of LWCC, so we here, and big fan of that group. An administrator of Virginia General Assembly 2025 through 2026 Facebook page. So she's in the thick of it for a lot of it. And she's also an advocate to help other folks find resources for POTS, which is exactly what she's going to talk about, and from that perspective. And it's, you mentioned, oftentimes there's invisible disabilities, and this speaks directly to that. So here you go, Cheryl.
Hi, I've never spoken about this before, except to friends. I've never gotten in front of a group of people, so I'm a little nervous, so just, no, I mean, really, I talk to friends about it, but I don't, and my daughter, but I've never talked to a group. And predominantly, I'm here to talk about invisible disabilities. People, you see them on the street and you don't realize that they have a disability. And I've been a caregiver and a patient. And mostly I'm here to talk about my daughter's disability and experiences. So basically for both of us, this occurred more in adulthood. This was not a childhood or educational disability. This is more something we both developed, as an adult. And these are considered disorders, syndromes, sometimes diseases, but it's kind of like they're not really sure where to put some of these things. So anyway, she was diagnosed with POTS after a long, long ordeal and experiences of being told it was an anxiety issue. And anyway, so she was diagnosed with that, and I have an autoimmune disorder. So, but like I said, I'm here really to talk about problems, that she's had. Her disorder, POTS, P-O-T-S, fits within dysautonomia. That's always a hard word to say. And I've become more familiar with it than I really would be happy about. And she has a list of symptoms, and the interesting thing is that many times POTS has like one or two real distinctive problems that occur with it, but then there's other things. It's kind of like almost like, I hate to use the word POTS, it's a pot of different disorders and syndromes and things like that, but there are two major things. And there's a link on here. You can look this up if you know someone who you think, might be having problems with this. In particular, fainting, blood pressure problems, heart rate problems, those are kind of indicators that there's something going on. So anyway, I just wanted to at least start with that and explain what POTS is for 10 seconds really quick. It's a group of disorders that feature orthostatic intolerance. Orthostatic intolerance is the term used to describe symptoms that occur when a person stands up and can be relieved by lying down. Symptoms of orthostatic intolerance, which often include dizziness or fainting, happen because not enough blood flows back to the heart when the person moves from a lying down or seated position to standing up. Someone referred to it once, a doctor a long time ago, as like when you're scared, when you're frightened, your blood flow tends to leave your extremities and go to your heart. For some reason or other, the autonomic system is not acting correctly, and what happens is the blood leaves the extremities and goes to the heart. But of course, then you feel like you're going to faint. And so that's part of it. What I also wanted to talk about, though, was that we have found over the years that the biggest problem has been accommodations. The ADA is a good foundation, but basically it really doesn't tell the employer, you really have to do this. And there's many ways for employers to fire people, or basically things like that have to do with these very invisible disabilities. And I know my daughter just lost her job this year because she couldn't come back to work. And they weren't going to leave the position open, which we understand. But at the same time, there are accommodations that companies can give to these people. And anything from seating to time, especially the hardest has been leaving to go to doctor appointments. I don't know if anybody else has run into that, but that's really the most difficult, is getting employers to give you that time to go and get the help you need. And that has been the biggest problem. And then you have to take forms to the doctor. The doctor has to fill out that, where are you going to get that time? There are many, many issues that have to do with these disabilities. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I should tell you about. An example would be, I think one of the things we could look at in Virginia is the bill right now about maternity leave, because that also helps, women basically who have disabilities stay home longer. So that is one bill that I'm seeing right now. Basically, I think what I wanted to do the most was to say that I always find it ironic that people want people to work. They want them to work. Everybody says, well, everybody wants a handout, they should work. Well, most of these people want to work. And basically what happens is we have a society where it's not appreciated that if you give many of these people accommodations, they will do a great job. And my daughter has worked really, really hard, to get with companies that basically will give her that time and those accommodations. And I think that's been the biggest struggle. And I'm not really sure right now, when it comes to legislation, what specific things can be done, but I would mention trying to strengthen the Americans for Disability Act and make it, a much stronger foundation than it is right now. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover, because I really wanted Riley to talk. She has many of the same disorders and syndromes that my daughter has. And by the way, my daughter just had a baby a year ago, so it's okay at my house right now. But anyway, that makes up for some of the awful things that have happened over the years. But anyway, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Riley, and she's just going to talk about.
Hi, my name is Riley English, and I have dysautonomia in POTS and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I found out in my junior year of high school, and I have graduated. It took, 3 years to get my diagnosis, starting from my freshman year of high school, and I probably started having symptoms in 6th grade. I can talk. I'm a theater kid. I can talk pretty loud. No worries. So I started having issues with just headaches in 6th grade year, and it progressed to I started fainting in my junior year. I started with fainting 1 to 2 to even 3 times a day in class or at school or at home or out with friends. And I'm very, very lucky to have gotten my diagnosis in 3 years, because that is so quick for some people.
Yeah, 10 years.
It takes forever to get a diagnosis from something like POTS because nobody knows what it is. And I, as of last week, finished writing a book about being disabled. I actually have it with me. So this is what surviving looks like. And it goes through me finding my diagnosis and dealing with school and class and all these things, but the hardest thing for me was school. I dealt with teachers not understanding, saying I'm faking it or I'm doing it for attention or to get out of class. And I even had a teacher put me in the hospital my junior year of high school. She ignored my medical plan, she put me in danger, and I ended up in the ER for 6 hours on breathing treatments. I later went to my administration and they told me that this was a relationship issue and I needed to work on my grades. I had an A in that class. There was no reason for me to get punished when it was the teacher's fault that put me in danger. I was not protected at school. That was the worst day of my life, and it is written in this book. One of the other hard things is seat time. Getting out of class for doctor's appointments was one of the hardest things I could have ever had to deal with. I had racked up about 23 hours of seat time, almost a full day of seat time, because I had doctor's appointments. I couldn't miss them. I had to make the decision between my health and my education, which is a decision no one should have to make. It was such a hard decision to make, and my administration could do nothing about it to give me less hours. They still gave me those hours. I had to sit for 4+ hours after school every day just to graduate. And it was so difficult. And one of the other things I want to read is, I wanted to read just a paragraph from my book that specifically talks about the mental health of people with invisible illnesses. And so it says, what I wish everyone knew about my mind. I wish you knew how heavy this is on my mental health. How often I've sat in hospitals surrounded by people and felt completely alone. How many times I've cried, not just from pain, but from the weight of feeling misunderstood. How there are nights I've wondered if living like this is even worth it. Purely because it takes so much effort to have people hear you. And I am so thankful to be put on this panel like the second I walked in, so I'm glad I could talk about this, but I've wanted to educate and talk to people about what it's like to live like this, and that is what's important about my book, because I talk to what it's like to lose friends, what it's like to sit in a classroom and have teachers not believe you. But also I talk about the teachers that have protected me with their life, and it has meant the world to me. And I could not thank those people enough.
And you have a great support system.
And I have my mom, who has taken me so many doctor's appointments, and she has been my rock in everything. I love her so much. So.
Yeah, she was lucky for 3 years, because that's really unheard of. Most of the time it's 8 to 10, and doctors are saying, well, it's anxiety, and they send you home. Yep, I know. And so that's why I'm saying I'm so glad she came and had the time today, Jimmy, to talk to everybody about this, because it's really concerning. And it is great to have a support system. A lot of people don't have that. That's the other part of this. I mean, with my daughter having lost her job, she could have, hired an attorney, but she didn't, because she made the decision not to do that right now. But as I'm saying, think to myself, most people don't have the resources to go and hire someone when they're fired like that. And we just don't have the ability within this state and within this country to really deal with people, to help them with their disabilities and protecting their rights. That's extremely important. We've been through this for years now. And, it's really difficult. Oh, and the other part of it too, do you tell your employer? Because it isn't something you see. You're not in a wheelchair. Do you mean you're not, you're not basically, do you tell them? And you don't have to. The law doesn't say you have to do that. But the question is, if you don't, and then they hire you and you ask for accommodations, is that going to work? So, we've had some, I'm trying to be positive about this, but we've had some very, very bad experiences over 10 years. It's been a long haul. So thank you guys so much for letting us talk about dysautonomia. So anyway.
Thank you both. And yes, special thanks to Riley, who literally walked through the door, and we had one panelist drop out, and we were the perfect, I would say even better, potentially, voice to add on to this. So thank you very much. And last panelist, and then we'll get to everyone else's questions or thoughts, is Leslie Pakula. Said that correctly? Yeah, you did. Cywinski. Yeah, we get last names that scare people. I'm trying to do it. Leslie has served the infant and toddler connection of Chesterfield for 37 years. Oh, it's 27? I'm so sorry. Typo. Where she has worked as a service coordinator, intake coordinator, service supervisor, and now she is the program's manager. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Kansas, a master of social work from VCU, and a certificate in infant mental health. Leslie's dedication to the children and families in the program is really limitless, and she consistently goes above and beyond, not only in securing essential services, but also connecting families with whatever resources they may need, from clothing and food to toys and other support systems. She is a phenomenal advocate for all families, so please take it away, Leslie.
Aileen, thank you for adding to that. So I work with children birth through 3 who have delays in their development. So I work at the Infant and Toddler Connection of Chesterfield, but there is a program anywhere you go in the United States. Although I will say, if you live in Richmond, Chesterfield, or Henrico, there are more resources for people and children with disability than when you go in rural areas. So just kind of another topic to consider, where you live really does dictate services you get. And we are certainly lucky, particularly I can talk about Chesterfield, because it is robust with resources, but other localities don't have that. So essentially, just to tell you a little bit about what I do, but I'm going to back up and tell you a little bit about my background. So I grew up in Kansas City, and I have a brother who has Tourette syndrome. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. His is pretty minor, but it's a neurological disorder where you have some tics. But interesting back then, so my brother's probably 55, so we're talking 50 years ago. No one knew what it was, or I guess didn't know a lot about it, and my parents were actually accused of child abuse. So that's kind of how I grew up. My grandfather was a pediatrician in Kansas City and served typically lower income or poor families. And then if you think about it, then they have this grandchild who his son is being accused of child abuse. So that's kind of how I got interested in this field, moved out to Richmond to go to VCU. And I've always wanted to work with children and became really interested in early intervention. So what we do is we serve children birth through 3 with delays in their development. We do assessments on the children, and then we actually go in the home and work with families. So we have that privilege of really getting to know families in their home, in their natural environment. Our philosophy is parents are the best teachers for their children, and so we're really a support to those parents, right? So we're not doing therapy with children, we're teaching parents how to promote development in their children. We have physical therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, developmental specialists. We also have service coordinators that really give resources to families, because piggybacking on what you're saying, having a child with a disability can be challenging. When Aileen asked me, and Aileen is actually a Spanish interpreter who actually goes into the homes with us, so we have the opportunity to work with her, kind of what are the challenges. I'm going to piggyback on what you say. A challenge in, I think, the United States in general is childcare, right? Having quality childcare. But you throw in a kid with a disability, and particularly a child with some behavioral challenges, like think about children with autism, those kids get kicked out of daycare, right? And then how do you work, right? We want parents to work. We don't want to give them handouts, but how do you do that if there's no quality daycare in the area, particularly serving children with disabilities? Or let's say your child has a feeding tube or oxygen. There's not a lot of good quality daycares out there that serve those children. And really, I would say in general, good quality daycares are probably for the rich. They cost a lot of money, right? So just kind of a challenge. I'm trying to think what else. So I'm here to talk about the resources that we have, which again are pretty robust in this area, but also the challenges that parents may face. And so I look forward to your questions. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to also do some piggybacking. One thing I'd like to say is that a lot of disabled folks want to become productive members of society. They want to work or create, do things to enrich their lives, contribute to society. But it's also okay if they can't. And we need to fund them. We have the tax money. We just don't have the political will. And it's okay if they can't. And it's okay if they can't their whole lives. Because we're supposed to live in a society where we care for each other. We collaborate. We all love having smooth roads to drive on for the most part. We all love having elevators, which is an accessibility tool that works for everybody. So I think I would love to see an avalanche of tax money to support those who can't support themselves, or maybe they can only work part-time. Tax money to pay caregivers, because there's too much of relying on the invisible labor of family members, especially women. And that helps society to the tune of what? Billions of dollars? I've heard figures as high as like $5 or $6 billion. So I'm not worried about people who might get a handout or who might try and do a little fraud here and there. That's not going to be the majority of people. It's like, please come to my house and show me a time where I'm not doing my caregiving. Go ahead and try and catch me not doing it, right? It's like it's a 24/7 job, whether you work for it in your job or you're taking care of a family member. So yeah, I think getting the tax money to these resources, and especially for early childhood, intervention, and they can't go to the regular or the daycare they get kicked out of. Well, why isn't there one that is specific to their needs? It's just we just have to put our tax money towards those things.
It's weird because accessibility, like ramps and elevators and stuff, can help able-bodied people too.
Thank you both. Thank you to the whole panel. If we could give them all a round of applause, please. That would be great. One of the reasons I want to do this as a candidate is because this is not my wheelhouse. I don't know enough about this issue, and that bothers me, because this is, as we just seen, real-world impacts happening to so many of our neighbors. And so I want to learn more from everyone. Luckily, I've been connected to these lovely folks. I would just want to make a note about what we can do at the federal level is exactly what Heather just talked about. I don't care if my taxpayer money goes to someone I don't know, because I feel like what is real patriotism in this country is making sure that we look out for one another, and if somebody needs a hand up, we provide it. That's number one. And I know the tax system is always one of those third rails of a lot of, especially at the federal level, elected officials. How are you going to find the money? That's their job to figure out, not ours. But that said, too, it's also we have to make sure that that money is supporting systems that are actually helping. And you mentioned this, Cheryl, about how the Americans with Disabilities Act was a landmark piece of legislation, but it also did not go far enough. And in some corners of our society, it's used as a tax incentive checkbox as opposed to fulfilling the obligation we have to take care of one another. One of the things Heather had told me also is that you shouldn't park next to a handicap spot, or handicap parking, because if someone has to get out on the side from wheelchair access, they can't go out there. That's an easy fix. Things like that can be simple, of just making sure there's a buffer there so that we're actually fulfilling our obligation. I haven't done it ever since then because I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to think about these things, but I need to. We all need to. And I know there's some folks in the audience here who are also thinking about this and who have their own experiences. We'd really like to hear from you. You don't have to be a policy expert. In my line of work, sometimes working in social advocacy, it's better if you're not, depending on who the audience is. But we're just here to have this conversation and hear from everyone else's experiences and learn from it. And so if anyone has any thoughts or any questions for our amazing panelists who are a lot better about talking about all of the context of this than I am, and please, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Yes, please, would you mind going to the microphone in the middle as well?
Hi. I really appreciated everything I heard today. My mother and I are both have POTS, so we definitely have a lot of experience with invisible illnesses and not being believed and not being able to get time off school. But I also have several visible disabilities, including I'm visually impaired. I don't have my cane right now but most of the time when I'm up and walking, you will see me with my cane. And that has been a big struggle for me throughout my school career, because in kindergarten I was struggling with reading and doing math because I couldn't see it and it wasn't being provided in a format I could access. And so my kindergarten teacher told my parents, this child has a learning disability, and she might have said some highly inappropriate words to describe it. And my parents took me to go get neuropsych testing just to shut her up and see if maybe there was something they could do to help me learning. And we got that neuropsych testing done. What did we find out?
Profoundly gifted. But the schools continue to this day to push back against that. We're here to talk about that from another perspective, where we need to do something about the perception of people with disabilities. People with disabilities are treated in a lot of cases as lesser than, right, less intelligent, less able. And I've got 3 kids that have the same condition. They've got multiple health conditions, immune disorders, dysautonomia, vision.
Yes, through the entire time of the educational system, they kept calling me stupid. I had to go on a lot of leave because of my immune system and POTS and stuff. And this year when I was writing in my Common App essay and my whole circumstances, I just looked at it and I was like, God, my school career was so hard. How did I do it? And that was one thing that I really would like to fight for, is in the educational system, making it so that the people after me do not ever have to do that, where they look back and wonder, how did I do that? I want them to be able to look back and go, I can just talk loud too, guys. I'm the editor-in-chief on my school paper. Somehow that means I need to talk loud too. But I want people to be able to look back on their educational system, educational experience, and feel like they were supported all the way, and their schools got them to where they were today, rather than feeling like they got to where they are today despite the school system fighting them every step of the way.
Thank you.
She would be involved in your panel too if you're looking for someone else. She said she's willing to be involved in the committee as well.
Come on up. Also, what is your name?
Lilith Holmes.
Lilith, we have an extra seat. You want to sit up here with us? Is that okay?
What time is your hard cutoff? She has another conflict, but you can
Like 4:30.
4:30. Okay. Fine.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you, Lilith. Yeah, let's give her a Thank you for being here. Yeah, it sounds like I think we all can project, but we'll just have the microphone up here. Just, Lindsay, would you like to? Yeah, thank you.
Do you want me to turn this off? Or
Whatever you're... We're rolling with it today, everybody.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Doherty. I recently was elected in the 75th House of Delegates District. This panel, I know some of you, but is kind of comprehensive in a lot of the work that I've done. I'm the mom of 2 young kids, both of whom have autoimmune disorders, autoimmune disorders, learning disabilities, and it has been a challenge from day one to yesterday to get them the services and accommodations that they need, to get health care provided to them in a timely manner, in a way that my family can afford. And so that's one of the main things that I ran on. I also am a senior research administrator up at VCU. And so I work with world-leading doctors in muscular dystrophy research. And so I manage NIH and NSF grant funds that are put into clinical trials, natural history studies. And so thank you for being here. I really appreciate you being here and talking to folks about your experience. I think that there's a lot of really great things that are happening in research that are being impacted by the federal government. I think there's a lot of stuff happening in education that's being impacted by the federal government. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited about being elected is that hopefully we can start making those protections and those changes at the state level if the federal government is not going to provide that. And so just thank you guys for being here. I appreciate all the advocacy and work that you all have done, and hopefully we'll be able to see some real movement on that with some of the changes that we're seeing at the executive level, but also in the House of Delegates. And so welcome opportunities to connect with those that I haven't had the opportunity to meet with before, and thank you again for putting this on.
Lindsay, before you go, is there anything we can do to support you and in these efforts during the session that's coming up?
So just legislation ideas. Obviously, I've had my own pathway. I've connected with a lot of families. We tend to find each other because the school doesn't support us. And so actually was at a parent-teacher conference for my daughter who's in 4th grade a few weeks ago, and had a piece of paper that the teacher had given me, kind of like what she was doing well, what she needed to fix. And there was another mom who was walking out at the same time I was, and she said, "Oh, I threw that in the trash can." And I laughed and I said, "I don't have that level of, I forget like the word I used, but I don't have trust in the system enough to throw the paper away." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, my daughter's on an IEP, and I need to take this home and put it with the binder full of other documentation that I have as to what services and accommodations are being provided for my child." And she looked at me and she goes, "My son's on an IEP, and I probably should do that too." And so then we ended up like talking for a while in the parking lot. We exchanged numbers, and I told her that there's a whole group of folks that are trying to hold the school system accountable. It's not just my school; it's pretty much every school, based on every parent that I've talked to. And so my goal is just to kind of like look at the root causes, but identify pieces of legislation that either change the wording in current code or adding to code to provide the protections that they need. We have blanket gifted testing in our schools, but gifted and learning differing abilities is on the same spectrum, right? And it's just different way that kids learn. And so we automatically test for and put these kids into certain programs, but I literally had to fight years and years to get both of my children tested, even having to go outside of the school system to get that proof, quote unquote, that they required to get them the services that they needed. And at the federal level, that shouldn't be happening. At the state level, that shouldn't be happening. And yet that's pretty much everybody's experience. And so we just really need to hone in on what is currently there, what we can do to fix it. And so if anybody has ideas on how to do that, I would love to work with you on that. So please reach out. Yeah.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got a lot.
So I have zero intention of actually speaking today, but I feel led to. My name is Jen Smith. I'm a family navigator with a local nonprofit in the Richmond area that works with kids with medical complexities. Also, I am a mom to a child with multiple disabilities. He has autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, CMV, and PANS. So like PANS is very difficult to get diagnosed. It's still very new in the medical world and not many people know about it. So it took us years to get that diagnosis. But I will say in my work and in my personal life, I think the biggest thing that needs working on is the Medicaid waiver system. So during COVID, legislation changed to allow parents to become caregivers. And I personally worked in the Medicaid field for many years, and I was very against this. And this was while my son was going through all of these issues. And I was like, no, I really don't need to be paid to watch my child. Like, it's my child, it's my responsibility. But during COVID, and still, there's a very much of a lack of resources for caregivers that stay around, that will get paid $13 an hour without any benefits, that want to work with children with disabilities, mostly behavioral issues. And so finally, I reluctantly became a caregiver, which was great because I couldn't work. My son has lots of therapy appointments, doctor's appointments. We traveled to Pennsylvania for treatments. And now legislation has, again, changed, and so they're taking that away from parents again, which it is what it is. But when they came out with that legislation, they made it seem like it was just going to affect the parents of children that were getting paid. It's actually affecting everybody. Everybody's hours are getting decreased. My son had 62 hours per week, and we went to 0. So I have no one that can come in and help me. I can't pay them. I have good family support, but I don't have, my parents are in their 70s and 80s. They can't come and help me with my disabled child. So that is a huge issue across the board with a lot of people. Also the pay, $13.88 an hour. You can go to McDonald's and make more than that. Why are we paying the people that are working with this such special community and population $13.88? I feel like there's more that I want to say, but I can't think of anything. There's so many issues. But yeah, I think that's just, actually, hold on. Okay, so getting the services that are allowable on the waiver, assistive technology, DME, durable medical equipment, sorry, I kind of speak the language because I've been in this for so long, is very hard. You have $10,000 a year, and it's near impossible to get things approved. We wanted alarm systems on all of our doors because my son elopes, he has autism, and we were denied. We wanted a medication dispenser for my child so he could try, and he's 17, he needs to learn how to take his medications on his own. We were denied. So what are these funds being used for? I work with lots of people that are trying to get modifications in their home, denied. Finding someone who is even going to come out and accept waiver money is extremely difficult. And then it takes months or years to finish the process, and they're not getting anything done. And the schools, huge issue. I battled with my son from, well, my daughter has Ehlers-Danlos. So we battled with that for a while, and then she was bullied, and then I just decided to take her out and homeschool her. Jordan, who's my son with major disabilities, we worked with him from kindergarten until COVID hit. And then COVID, they were like, oh, he can come back, but he has to wear a mask and stand 6 feet apart. And I was like, you're about to kick him out of school before, how do you think he's gonna keep his distance from people? So we decided to bring him home too. Kindergarten and first for my youngest child, who is gifted and talented, but also has ADHD. He would finish his work in 10 minutes, get bored, get in trouble. I'd beg the teachers, can you please give him other work to do? He's not a bad kid, he's just bored, he's not engaged. And they didn't want to do it. And I said, you know what? I'm tired of fighting the school systems. So I now homeschool all 3 children. All 3 have issues. I work full-time, and I work for the disability community. And you're right, it's a huge, huge issue, and it's across the board with school systems. I don't know how to fix anything, but those are some issues that need to be fixed.
I want to add to the whole money on like supplies for disabled people. Recently, for me, I need ankle braces or laser therapy. My ankles are terrible. I like so bad. And my doctor has told me that ankle braces, $1,000 per foot, insurance will cover. But insurance will cover a surgery that will fuse my ankle together at 18 years old. Insurance will pay for something that will ruin the rest of my life and make me even more disabled the rest of my life, but won't pay for ankle braces. And that is becoming a problem with, I need surgery to get another port, but my first port didn't work, so is insurance going to cover it? Do I have to get PIC line or Richmond, which are, they're all like a port system, but those are more likely to get infected, so do I have to risk getting more infected to be able to get something again, or do I have to pay so much money to be able to get a port again, because my first one moved, and I had to get it removed because it was causing more pain than it. Insurance won't cover any of these things for me, and it is becoming an issue for me to get any help at all to be able to get any of these things. And my family cannot afford to get those things. We cannot afford to get a laser therapy. We cannot afford to get a surgery. I can't have insurance pay for it. So I'm stuck being in more pain than I should be because we can't afford it. And insurance won't cover it. And on top of the school day, with the seat time and everything else, my college I had to drop out of 3 weeks in, my dream college, because they put me in the hospital twice. They put me in danger multiple times, and they refused to give us all of our money back for tuition because they didn't break any law. So they were sharing my medical information with people I didn't give permission. They were forcing me into ambulances, but they're not going to pay. And they're not going to help us. And we weren't even asking for extra money or for them to even pay for the hospital bills. We just wanted them to give us the money back. I wasn't even there for a whole 3 weeks. And they won't give us all of my tuition back, which is a private $65.
Economic stress that they put parenting on families when this happens. And also, again, back to the legal issue, you know? In other words, really, can you afford a lawyer to deal with getting your money back or, you know, or helping you?
Because even if you have just enough money to afford a lawyer, all that money is going to all of your medical supplies. So you can't do both. You can either get the medical supplies or a lawyer, but you can't do both. Don't have a easy side.
This is a bit of a segue, but back 1 year ago, because of the way legislation works, and because my parents can't get paid, there is more no one to help the disabled person like me, and a lot of people here that stop feeling like a burden on the system and to our parents because there is no support system, there is no money, we cannot get any of the medical stuff we need. The educational system doesn't want to help us. So it's squarely put all pressure goes on us and our caregivers to take everything, which that can be illegal.
I just want to add to that. I have admitted this to a public crowd. I have cried at my parents telling them I'm sorry when I'm on the way to the hospital.
I've done that too.
Because I'm in so much pain. I'm in so much pain I need to go to the hospital, but I feel bad and I'm crying at my parents. I'm sorry for making you do this when I need to go to a hospital, which is not okay.
Yeah, gosh, this is breaking my heart. And I'm a parent who, I want to tell you, you are never a burden. Okay. It's the system, I think, and and we hear these stories, and my mind goes to, wow, this almost sounds like it's by design. In multiple areas of society, we're making these choices on purpose when we don't have to. We had to modify our home, just to give you some insight too, in terms of the home modification aspect. The powers that be, insurance and society and government, needs to expand what it means to need access and accessible tools and things to protect your children if they're struggling with a disability or multiple disabilities. It is not a disabled person's fault that they're the way they are, whether it's something they're born with or something temporary. And when we bought our house, we were lucky enough to be able to buy a house when Sadie was young, and it has 2 staircases that are very steep. And then it was about a year later that we discovered she was developing a neuromuscular condition. And insurance doesn't pay for stair lifts. We got a tax credit on our ramp that we now have to our front door. But none of that's paid for. The grab bars and the activity chair, some of the stuff was covered by insurance. And let me tell you, Medicaid, when we were on Medicaid at one point, it paid for her first power wheelchair 100%. So again, that's just one anecdote, and there are many others pointing to why we need universal health care. And that's definitely something that government can do.
Chair would cost without health insurance?
Yeah, and it depends. There are different models, but it could be upwards of $40,000. Stair lifts, $10,000 and up, depending on how, like if you want them to go straight up and down or curve around staircases. Sadie pretty much can't go to any house that doesn't have a ramp access. So if she makes a friend and they don't have a ramp access, I'm happy for them to come to our house, but that's an example of like how it shuts some people out of everyday life because we don't have universal housing. Builders aren't building enough houses with universal design, wide doorways and ramps and things like that. There was a new house being built down our street, and I saw the staircase go up to the front door, and I'm like, they had an opportunity, to put in a ramp, because even if they didn't need it, maybe the next owner would, or they might have friends who are wheelchair users, or a cane or walkers and need that kind of access. So it is out of reach for so many people. Accessible vehicles, that's something we had to upgrade to a wheelchair van. It is out of reach for so many wheelchair users. It's just so aggravating and frustrating because a lot of the accessible accessible vans are used. They don't have the most up-to-date equipment, and so you're stuck with something that breaks down every 5 minutes. And the terror of being a wheelchair user stuck on the side of the road is just terrifying. It's the stuff of horror movies, quite frankly. So yeah, there's so many areas where more money from wherever it comes from needs to happen, but I think also public service messaging. Let's put aside, that's something that Virginia could do in the General Assembly, like let's designate some money just for PSA about, all the kinds of different disability needs and helping people, shift their perspective on, how often do you notice when someone's got a disability? You're at the grocery store or out shopping, and do you make room for wheelchair users or cane users, walker, or do you just sort of stand there, oblivious? I mean, I've got my stories, but one thing I wanted to pass around real quick before because I don't want to forget this. I'm going to pass around pictures. There's a Momentum Refresh makes this huge mobile restroom. And I first learned about it because I got an article served up to me about the Minnesota State Fair, and they had a Momentum Refresh there. And it's just basically a big mobile accessible restroom. And you can even if you wanted to go into business as one of the franchise owners, you could. But this is an example of creative thinking outside the box that cities or organizations or whoever could provide for big events, or maybe it needs to be as part of a building that's got inaccessible restrooms, but they can park one of these mobile bathrooms next to. So just getting creative, thinking outside the box, helping people understand that we need so much more in terms of tools and equipment than is currently considered like the norm for it.
Disability, that is the one thing that anyone can do at any point in their life. So you kind of got to protect it now before someone else. The people who aren't protecting it, you're going to become disabled at some point. There's always that chance. And most people will. Even just going to old age or need a walker, you will become disabled at some point, and you might as well fight for it now before you can. And on top of medical equipment, service dogs are, the state has a cost. And like just to get them trained. And I wanted one for my whole life because it would help me. It would tell me, like it would be able to help me before I fit. It would be able to help me so if I fit. It would make my life so I could go out on my own and do things on my own with less help. I'm very lucky to be able to do things on my own some, but can I live on my own easily? I need my parents' help for a lot of things. When I go out with friends, I always have to let my friends know. They always have to be prepared to catch me if I faint. They always know where my med bag is. But if I have a service dog, that would help me. But it's the same price as a car for a dog. And there's companies that'll help you, but they will either help with part of the price, or it takes years to get one. Like years on years on years to get one. You can ask for that, and then also you have to send all these doctor's notes to get permission to get one from one of these companies, and then someone like me, because I have an invisible disability, and I'm not, like, you know, like I'm able to walk on my own and do some of these things on my own, they won't accept that. They're like, you can do things on your own, so we're not going to give you one. And that's not fair. At least not to me.
Yeah, like I read an article in the photojournalism class I took in high school, where it was about a girl with cerebral palsy, CP, and she had a service dog, and she wasn't allowed to take the dog into the school with her because the administrators gave the reasons why, like, oh, it might distract other students, and oh, a human caregiver could do the same job.
To piggyback on that, my niece was disabled as a service dog, and I'm trying to figure out how she got it. She was diagnosed with autism. But after she graduated from AU, she went to apply for a job with kids with autism, and one of the places wouldn't hire her because she had a service dog. Which, it was just, and she did end up getting a job with kids with autism with the service dog. And of course, it's a great asset, right? The kids love it, but it was just interesting.
And like, a small bit on that is like, they'll say that the dog's distracting, but I feel like if you have something like a baby disorder, can you imagine how distracting it would be if you're unconscious? Like, that is, so my classmates at school sometimes joke about it. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's very much not. But like, I would have substitute teachers try to call 911, and I'm very thankful for the classmates I have because I can't afford to go in an ambulance when I know I'm fine. They're gonna tell me all the same things I've already known my whole diagnosis life. So like, it is just as distracting for me to be unconscious than to have a dog that's like, oh yeah, you should sit down.
The dog's really not distracting.
They're not. Because they're supposed to be trained to be quiet and sit and like sleep wherever, like they'll do. Like they're trained to kind of stay out of the way. But like, people are like, oh, it's gonna be so much more distracting. Like, I'm on the floor. Yeah. Choices.
I'm Riley's mom, I'm Kara, and so I'm resonating with especially the moms who are in this room who've done a lot of the heavy lifting of caring for folks. And I just want to kind of raise it to a little bit of a macro level. We've been talking about money and legal restrictions and opening up some of those. But to speak to the politicians in this room, we need politicians who care about the public good and actually care about equality and inclusion and representation and what's happening to women in this country and what's happening to people who are disabled in this country. So I applaud you for being here and listening and taking that back to the places where you can make an impact. So thank you for doing that.
Longing for a house with for blind students for a house built out with your website capabilities. And I'm not sure I actually think
with one of them, literally when I talked to, I was telling him my website accessibility is so important. I told him about a couple of online courses I took that were so inaccessible, it wasn't even funny, and how my parents had to sit down next to me, like a 14-year-old child, and read it to me, and if I didn't know how to read, and I had to tell them this politician about how being that experience wasn't like accessibility and screen compatibility and braille display compatibility, so support. And then after I got done with the whole speech, and I don't think this is exactly word speech, but it was like, what's accessibility? I feel like politicians, and I'm really grateful for, again, the politicians in the room who do take the opportunity to educate themselves. But I feel like if you're going to be a politician, you should be educating yourself on all the issues you will be on, not the ones you like.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like I should be doing the panel. But honestly, I do want to say that the cornerstone of my campaign is dignity and rights. Dignity and rights. And the fact that anyone would ever go through a situation where they feel like a burden, and I know that people always talk about how we want. My life has just gotten better when I learned more about these things and meet people like this. And also inspired by the fact that I think we just came in and didn't have anything compared to this political event. Like, our politicians could learn a lot more from that kind of courage. When we talk about dignity and rights, we always overanalyze how it's supposed to be. You have to fill out a million different forms to prove that you need the support that we owe you. And I do think it's that way. We owe it to you. And I'm glad that Heather said it too, because you want to know why we all believe in our purpose? Because we're all here. And the fact that we all get to be here and have express an interest in what we're talking about, this is how things get better. This is how we create a society that's actually led by the people who have the best ideas, are the people who are the ones who are experiencing them. The ones who can come up with the most equitable solutions are the people who had to go through the most challenges. And that's, I agree with you all, there's some people who actually have a lot more power than I do, just a candidate right now, but are willing to be here and we're thinking as well. But also, the only way it changes is by all of us. The only way we do these things is not through electing necessarily the right party or the right candidate or being a majority of something. It is from us to mandate more. And my job in social and political advocacy, I've seen people take down billion-dollar industry as well as bad faith politicians with the people that were just six of them. There's like 19 of us right now. Imagine what good we could do with that. So I wanted to say, and of course the folks have learned this, that this is not the end of this conversation. This has become something that I've added to my website. It is something that's been talking more about when I give speeches, because it's exactly an example of everything I think that is wrong with our political system, is that some people have the right to have influence and some people don't. But that is built on asset cards. That is built on a system that says you can't be strong enough or rich enough or powerful enough to stop us, so we're going to get what we want done. But if we're always going to change anything, it comes from us refusing to accept the odds. It comes from us being willing to have these conversations, platforming one another, and being willing to have the courage to speak about those things. So tell me who that politician was. That's what I did. Oh, okay, of course it was. There you go. So, that's Jesse, do you want to say?
No, I just want to say that it's so important that holding your elected officials accountable is so important. And I know it's difficult when they don't recognize you. You can continue to write or call or whatever, and they send you that's one of those things that I try so hard not to do. I mean, I call people on my cell phone, and then I'm just like, oh, no, I should do that. But again, I think it's so important for people to feel heard and represented and know that there's someone that cares. And so I might not always be able to do something about it, but I want them to know that there's someone there that is listening and here who will try to get the information from there. So I'm a local official, but I mean, so I don't know. We all have to work together to make things.
Wait, no for concept?
It was technically there were two of them.
but kind of both Mark Early and Glenn Stewart. Glenn Stewart, it was like more obvious with that, where he was like, I don't know why I should care about this topic at all, but here you go.
What also means everybody should go down to General Assembly more often than they do. Because that's what you have to do. You have to love everybody. I hate to say it like that, but you do. And that's what I love to see people doing, is going down, doing and talking. Because, letters are great, all these things are nice, but at the same time, lobbying or even just going out and making an appointment, go and bother them, please.
I know I think Penny that I asked this year the opinion of the person who did that. But honestly, when people forget who they're supposed to serve, when they don't know how to be responsible, it's up to us to hold them accountable.
I just wanted to go back to a point that you made about the finances, going back to the money. The cost of equipment is hideous. We've dealt with that with the refreshable braillers that my kids need. They are not covered by anything. So schools are obliged to provide them if they're in the IEP and deemed necessary. But once she finishes school this coming year, if the DBVI doesn't supply it, she's looking at $18,000 for one device or $4,000, $5,000 for another device. So I did some digging a while back, and I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but some of this is dictated by Medicare policy. Once things are deemed uncoverable by Medicare, they can't cover it for kids. They do it with vision issues because they say that the general population tends to lose their sight as they get older. Because so many people were losing sight, they just said that they couldn't cover things. No more glasses coverage, no more reading aids, things like that. Once that gets into policy, the kids are automatically included in that. We need to do something to separate out medical necessity that affects education, affects ADLs, everything, from natural aging, natural, low-level helps. So that's something, to me, it's a big deal. Having lived in Europe for almost 20 years, we can do better. This does not even begin to touch what needs to happen. Prescription boxes need Braille on them here. We've got no large print. We've got no, the threshold issue in Europe, it is so much different than here.
I heard the paper that after World War II, most countries that didn't have universal health care already adopted universal health care, except for Yemen, Nigeria, I think China, and all the other places that have moved to the United States. So clearly it's possible, but the government didn't realize it, and so here we are. Like 100 years later. I know I said I wrote a book and a half that should be published eventually, and I didn't figure that out. But I also wrote a play in high school as my senior project, and my teacher didn't want me to put it on. Purely because she was one of the problems. But I never mentioned her in it. And the point was, if she let me come on the play, other people noticed that she was the problem. If she didn't let me come on the play, she was admitting that she was the problem. So I got to put on the play, but there were some people who were like, wow, this made like a lot of sense. And some people were like, why do you do? And like, I've always wanted to talk and try to help people understand, because invisible illnesses are so difficult to find, and I have friends who are diabetic or have a bunch of different things, and I put a lot of effort into maybe trying to write a book and do all these things, and I have plenty of people I talk about in the book, and none of them are named, and I haven't put names on the book, because there's a lot of things, including my college, that did me wrong. I didn't name it, but I have a whole chapter about how they treated me. They even let me cry on a crate in the hallway one time when I was about to faint, and a tour group got to watch that. I don't think any of the people are very good at that college. And I talk about the teacher that put me in the hospital. I talk about the friends that kind of left me. I talk about all the little things and the doctors that hurt me. And I really hope that this book finds a lot of people.
And you talk about the support.
I talk about the support that I found within
within doctors and teachers, and I've met some of the best teachers in my life in high school, but I've also met some of the worst. There was a very thin line of whether I had a good teacher or not, and it's not the same for a disabled person to have a good teacher. It's not like, are they fun to be around? It's like, are they gonna let me die in the classroom? Because I would be unconscious and my teachers would I'd wake up like an inch from my face, being like, no, this is your fault. Whereas I have other teachers who would keep snacks in the classroom for me.
I also had my share of really, really awesome teachers. They had the word and I were their clothes. Again, like people went around and said, it's not about are they fun to be around. One of my favorite teachers was not at all fun. Well, for me, she was fun to be around. That is the thing, is that our lives and what's good and helpful for us is not the same as for other people. Where it's like, it's just fun. You want to want to. Whereas for us, is this successful? Will this person help me? Will I be able to get there? What will happen if I faint, or if I can't see, or if I need to go to the urgent, and all of that stuff. And there is, and that's, again, it should not have to be as hard for us to figure out and work our lives around other people who don't want to help us. I feel like I was working that.
No, I was going to say, to go with that, one of the final things I just wanted to say was that when we finally found a doctor, this was many years ago, at ACU, who we went to when she got her diagnosis for PUS. We got there, went in, and he leaned over and kissed her top of her head and said, "We believe you."
I know.
It's important.
It's very important with your doctor. I got my health diagnosis in 5 years, so a little longer, but it was still pretty quickly. And I was lucky enough to go to a doctor in town. It's right on us. He was like, "Yep, you have possibly been right now." One of my favorite teachers ever was my history teacher in my junior year, and I hated his class. I hated doing any reading and work like that. He was a history teacher who was already writing and dyslexic, so I hated his class. But he put in all of his effort to stay with me, even when it wasn't his class. He would help me with my math class when he was a history teacher. He didn't know what he was doing. Like, he would do everything he could in his power to take care of me. And he let me sit in his class during seat time because the seat time class was like detention, not like getting hours. It was really, really rough, and I also had good doctors too. The doctor that got my diagnosis for dysautonomia was the best out there. I still see him, and I am 18, and he's a pediatric doctor. Yeah, but I still see him because he cares not only about my health, but about my life. He checks up on the theater things I do, the baking projects I do. He does everything to just ask how I'm doing, not just what are your symptoms, what meds do you want. He genuinely cares about what my life is, not just what my health is. And that makes all the world different for us, because so my English teacher, the one who was very strict, she's not like a single piece of state that she ever got in all of the years of teaching. But she always went out of her way to make sure I could see everything. And even when I said, no, I don't need that accommodation, it's too complicated, she's like, you're using it. I don't need the accommodation, but you will use this accommodation. And then the psych teacher I had is a very old, tiny man, he did not know anything about disability, and I came to his class, they said, I will do everything to make sure you can access this. And when we do the sheet reading exercises, I will make sure to get to that section with the kids and offering scouts, even if I have to stand there and help you. Because I told them about this experience I had right off the prior to the opportunity to do that. And I ended up being scout standing. The salad was making my turkey salad.
First, I want to say thank you very much for publishing a book. And as somebody else who also has dysautonomia, I can understand how many spoons that took.
Yeah, it took several months, and it's only 60 pages. I was tired, but I'm very proud of it. I put a lot of effort.
You're seen by me, at least. And I'm sure others. So I had 2 points I wanted to make. Was I got approval to get my caregiver paid, but if anybody in here has some ideas to help me navigate choosing which agency, for which reasons for my caregiver, I would love that. And the other thing is I'm really grateful y'all are putting this on, and that I came late, so this point might have already been made, so I apologize, because I just moved slower than I used to, and I miscalculated the time it was going to take for me to dress myself and so on, get the car started. Anyway, the question is, I desperately need to understand the triggering language in the Medicaid expansion language in the Virginia Code, because it looks like the feds are in fact going to cut off their supply of money. And what does that mean for those of us that require Medicaid to live? Like, I have 2 aggressive cancers and dysautonomia and a bunch of other less endangering things. But anyway, yeah, I need to have Medicaid or a plan. And yeah, I would be grateful for anybody who's already geeked and nerded out on the Virginia Code as per Medicaid expansion triggering language.
I haven't heard yet. I mean, I don't know. Is Lindsay still here? Or is she? No, she had to be.
Oh, there you go. The right person.
Happening now, but I was going to say, Gonzala Hashmi was covering that a lot.
Oh.
That was her big emphasis. And what I will do, Chris, is just email her. Do you know what I mean? That or
Okay.
and just ask her that question, because this was her concern. She was very worried about it.
So she's already nerded out on it and has staff that's probably even deeper into it.
I would think that there's certainly people there, because this was her big thing.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
What was going to happen when the bill would pass, the big beautiful bill.
Yeah. Big, beautiful betrayal.
Expansion issue, so I don't know.
Yeah, I literally had a brain tumor removed a little while ago, so I'm missing some memories. So thank you very much for reminding me.
That's the person I would.
Yes, thank you. Knowing the right person to ask is a big part of it, so thank you.
So I think we ran out of time for all of this. Please just feel free to look down and see yourselves where to apply.
For someone who really needs public speaking, I'm sure you a lot.
Well, thank you. And like I said before, all of the folks that are here, this is not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of one. The next step now is to provide planning to go here today, what the problem is, and then we'll have a town hall, what that looks like, to get your feedback from people who are actually impacted by it. It's just coming from me, it's not going to be good enough, it has to come from all of us. Because I truly believe that the solutions that we know, real solutions for real people, they're not predicated on possibility. They are matters of political will. The only way we get to move the political will part is by doing things like this. So thank you all very much for coming. It means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to everyone else who participated. Quick picture?
You have to involve an agency at some level.